we would just start and have you explain like what Dear Kelly is about and kind of what your goals were for it, as if somebody who didn't know what the documentary is about was watching this.
Yeah, so I guess on a base level, it's a character profile. It's not so much like a zoomed out story of a period of time like This Place Rules was. It's a character profile on the life and times of a person, a man named Kelly Johnson, aka Kelly J. Patriot, who I met at a White Lives Matter rally back in 2021. And I kind of met him at the end of like what was like reporters burnout. You just talk to so many of the same people repeating the same talking points that you just kind of get disinterested. And through his I guess just like story about his home being foreclosed upon by a allegedly predatory lender named Bill Joyner, I was able to get a glimpse into what factors caused his radicalization, and from there I just kind of dived down a rabbit hole myself for 4 years.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it was a really cool watch in in-depth way. And you did a really good job of like humanizing somebody who normally would just come off as like so abrasive and just so aggressive. And so it was cool to see like this different point of view of the kind of person that people normally would just write off as like somebody who, who's like quote unquote crazy. So that was kind of a cool, like I wasn't expecting to be so emotionally invested in it, like especially when you added the videos of like him and his family from when they were younger. um it was a really cool character profile, like as you put it. I haven't seen anything like that before, so yeah, it was a cool way to highlight that. I know you mentioned before that this project took like years, so how long, like from start to finish, like how long did the project actually take?
Well, if we were to take the very first shoot, which was April 11th, 2021, and then the final shoot, which was filmed 2.5 weeks ago of Uncle Pill at the skate park in Oceanside, California. That's like his final word. We just filmed that. I'm not too good at math, but I think it would be something around 4 years in total, maybe like 3 years and 11 months or 3 years and 9 months. So a long time.
Yeah, no, that is a seriously long time. Was
Yeah,
there?
I think I saw it in 2022 on
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, right? Because
Mhm.
you previewed it during the HBO tour.
Yeah, during the Channel 5 live tour, I previewed like a couple select scenes from the movie. I think I previewed the Kyle's party scene and then the ghillie suit scene.
I remember the ghillie suit. And then yeah, for the next couple of years, I was still thinking about Bill Joyner. I was like, did they ever find that dude? They ever track him down?
I mean, me showing that scene on the initial Channel 5 live tour is one of the things that led to him filing the lawsuit against us
Oh, it
because,
started there, huh?
well, yeah, because I think that from what I can tell, Bill and his legal defense thought that the whole movie was like an expose on him and his lending practices, when in reality, it's quite the opposite. If anything, this movie makes Bill look better than he did before.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gives him kind of like press in a way, so it's weird that he's so upset about it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I hope that it gets resolved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was there ever a point like while you were making the project that you almost gave up on it and you were like, you know what, I just can't do this anymore?
Well, at a couple different points, yeah. The first time I almost gave up on the film was whenever I failed to find Bill or failed to get in touch with him. Obviously, we tried almost every unconventional measure possible. We signed up for the country club where he's a member. We went to his workplace. We hung out in the area, the publicly listed area around his house. We did everything we could to try to make a friendly introduction to Bill, and he didn't want any part of the documentary. So that was the first phase of hopelessness. The second one was probably like after the intervention, because I was like, oh, well, if he didn't make a full turnaround, then I must be a failure of a documentary filmmaker because you're used to seeing those intervention shows on TV where they have the 90 days later and someone's just like a complete different person than they were before. When that didn't happen, I was kind of like, all right, well, what's the conclusion? And then I realized that that kind of is the conclusion of life. You can take small victories, but expecting people to just fully transform as a result of external pressure and factors is impossible. But like a lot of people were so disappointed by the ending, but I'm like, all right, him not being angry at Bill Joyner is definitely a victory in my book. If you were to compare Kelly in the opening Planned Parenthood scene, almost like passing out from anger, yelling about Bill, and then imagine him just less than 4 years later being like, I don't really care about the guy. To me, that's at least the grief process being 20 to 30% complete. A little bit past the anger stage, definitely still at the bargaining stage though. Because I saw him at the premiere a few weeks ago and I said, what'd you think of the movie? Because he went to the physical premiere in Orange County. And he said, yeah, Bill Joyner may have taken my home, but I'm not like letting them take our country. So I was like, that to me is like the bargaining stage of the grief process, to where he's like, he's not debilitated by anger, but he's still trying to place that Bill Joyner situation in the greater framework of saving the country, still to this day.
Hmm. So was there like what specific point like brought you back and kept you motivated to keep pursuing the project and finish it?
I mean, to be honest with you, and this isn't the most like Hollywood answer, I just had too much footage. You know what I mean? I was like, well, I have like fucking 300 hours of footage of this dude Kelly. I don't know what I'm gonna do with this. I might as well make something out of it. And so, in a sense, it was also just to get that out there. And then I also realized through looking at the footage that you can make a really special documentary when you make it over the course of a long period of time. Like some of the dopest documentaries in my eyes were filmed over the course of time, because you can see how people naturally change as the times change and conditions evolve. So that to me was just gratifying. I definitely don't think it's like magnum opus, like my best work I'm ever gonna do. But I think it's better than the first project, and I think that it's probably the last word that I want to have on like conservative radicalization psychology. Like as much as I'm talking about it right now because I'm trying to promote the movie and I obviously want people to see it. I think there's more interesting subjects in the world than like dissecting the mental framework of QAnon people. Like I'm doing a project soon about like endangered languages in the U.S., trying to help like document and spearhead projects to save endangered languages like Cajun French and Gullah Geechee and all these cool shit. That's to me, that's a sick way to spend time. I don't think I'm gonna make another movie about like why people are, down the right wing rabbit hole, but nonetheless, I still think it's interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that seems to draw in a lot of people, and I know that it's kind of been beat to death a little bit, but I think
Yeah.
with the documentary, it's a different point of view of it, so it kind of does still hold its own space. uh,
Mhm.
Going back to saying how you had like a bajillion hours of footage during like when you premiered, I heard that you like showed different shots of footage like during each showing. uh,
Yeah.
were there any like events or anything said to you during each premiere that kind of determined what was kept in and what was taken out?
Yeah, it's a great question. There definitely was. I mean, during the Channel 5 live tour, there was, I think, 36 different screenings. And I'm not going to say every single screening, but every other screening, I adjusted some feature of the film. Maybe it was I put a song where there didn't used to be a song, or I let awkward silence sit for an extra second before cutting to a title card. Little stuff that the audience might not totally realize I'm doing makes a huge difference. For example, like there's this scene, the intervention scene, whenever Kelly is opening up about his past trauma and how he wants to move forward. At most of the live screenings, I had like a sappy song playing during that. And I
Hmm.
felt like the music there was just a little bit too manipulative and it made it seem like he was going through this rebirth. It was like ambient, meditative, sacred hurts music. And I was like, you know what? Let me try this without the music. And then I played it without the music at the Seattle showing. And it was way more impactful because you're able to like, people can just get the real raw information and make their own judgment about the vibe that he's trying to give across without being told to feel a certain way. So a lot of
Yeah.
it was music choices. Also, like, the magazine Variety, who I guess they don't like us for some reason. That's just how it is with us in the corporate news. But they went to the Boston screening, and like there, I showed pretty much a carbon copy of the documentary that's out right now. But only like a little bit of my intervention letter was extended in that particular scene. And they wrote an article called Andrew Callaghan's new documentary about how the MAGA far right saved his life. You know what I mean? So it's just shit like that where I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I'm not saying I'm gonna pivot my entire presentation to like avoid a media smear, but now I know, okay, if you show too much emotion on screen and then say that anyone who's conservative helped you in any way, then they're gonna paint you as like a conservative apologist, which is crazy because half the country voted for Trump. Yet Variety and these publications want to make it seem like this is some fringe, insane movement that I've made the choice to pull from obscurity and platform for the sake of viewership. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's tough, especially on you guys being independent. Like I think we've seen that a few times. The one that surprised me was the NPR one too. Because you
They
did that interview and they were upset about Alex Jones, right?
they're going to always look for things to be upset about. But the
Hmm.
point is, they win. The news wins if I become conservative. That's like,
Hmm.
because once you go through any kind of controversy, if you become conservative after that, they can pigeonhole you as like this lunatic red pilled guy who can't get over himself. So that's the best thing that they can hope for. And I'm not conservative. If anything, conservatives think I'm like a left wing communist grifter. I get like anti-Semitic hate mail every single day. But but I'm not even Jewish. I'm just putting that out there. But they, you know, yeah, you guys know what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, we've seen it. Going back to kind of how you use the touring to kind of alter it and kind of feel things out. Did you do that with the HBO documentary, or was that a final cut that you
No.
previewed?
I wasn't even allowed to. I mean, part of the
Hmm.
thing is I wanted the HBO documentary to come out on July 4th, 2021, which was like
Hmm.
6 months after the Capitol riot. In my opinion, by then, January 6th was already old news. It came out 2 years and it really came out 2 entire years later, which was fine, but we had to have it picture locked a year before that. So like there was a year between having it picture locked and having to send it to all the executive producers in the studios for approval and color and sound mixing and all this shit, subtitling. And so it got kind of lost in the bureaucratic zeitgeist. So I couldn't even make any changes to it if I wanted to.
Do you doing both of those tours, would you do that for future projects? Like how do you feel about touring and doing that in general?
I don't think so, only because like I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but like I think I'm actually better at making documentary films than I was when I started Dear Kelly. Like some
Hmm.
of the shoots that we did for the original Dear Kelly stuff, like in 2021, it's like I'm towing the line between like comedy and exploitation, like having him recreate the arrest and like even the ghillie suit stuff. Like I probably wouldn't do that today. So part of the reason I wanted to premiere it is to see like are people going to have a negative reaction to this? I feel like now I would be happy to just like give it to a focus group of maybe like 5 to 10 friends who I know have seen the progression. But now that you mention it, I think it would be pretty tight to do like small screenings to like see if people like certain videos. But I probably wouldn't do 36 consecutive screenings for a documentary again.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, that's a lot to do all at once. And when you have like that broad of a scope too, I imagine that the feedback can sometimes be like overwhelming. And then you get too much coming in at once, and it's like, well, now I don't really know how to actually narrow this down because I'm
Yeah.
getting everything like all at once.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't want to be like a slave to your audience to where like how streamers who spend all day at home like with their chat, they almost kind of like their opinions are based upon the feedback they're receiving in real time. So if the
Hmm.
chat's like WL, they're like, oh, that kind of like codes their reaction to everything. I don't want to get lost in a feedback loop like that. But I'm never going to stream. I'm never going to do anything live, so I'm not too worried about it.
Hmm. And that can also kind of defeat the point of like real journalism too. If all you're doing is talking about what other people want to hear, it's like then then you're not even really putting out like real raw content.
Exactly. And there is something to be said for like testing it out with your actual fans because that was very helpful. But yeah, if you get lost in your own feedback loop, and you're catering to like what your audience wants, you're never gonna be able to surprise them because they're just gonna expect everything.
Hmm. Exactly. And like the way that you do journalism is it's very unique in the sense that like you're very good at like staying neutral, but also you're good at showing like all sides of everything as well. And I know
Hmm.
some people, well, not even some people, a lot of people don't like that. They they want you to go like a certain direction. They don't want you to show all
Yeah.
of a lot of people get really upset about that because going back to what I was saying earlier, like you humanized Kelly. He's a real like raw person and like all the far left people or the people who just hate conservatives in general,
Hmm.
they don't want to see that part of this. They just want somebody to be mad at.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that reality a lot of times does have like a left wing bias.
Hmm.
If you're looking at the realities of late stage capitalism, if you want to put a microscope on that, you're going to see some dark and ugly stuff. Whereas I feel like with conservatism, a lot of it is living in a fantasy. And if you show them a video of someone suffering, they're like, "Why are you showing me this shit? Like, stop trying to pull on my heartstrings." You know what I mean? This is America, and it's weird because as much as people say that I am like, biased, like, I appreciate you saying unbiased, but it's a weird thing when you're talking about bias because like every single person has their biases and their implicit judgments based upon who they are, where they came from, and the experiences they had as a young person, especially that like coded the way they see the world. You know, like I lost friends to police brutality when I was young in high school and before then, way before the George Floyd situation happened. So when that did happen, it was like I was automatically on the side of the protesters. So there's stuff like that to where maybe if I was from a place where I grew up really tight with law enforcement, or my dad was a cop, I wouldn't understand their grievances. So I think that once journalists can accept that nobody can actually be unbiased, I think we're going to get to a better place. Because if people watch my videos, they understand that I'm left leaning. So they're going to be getting a left leaning perspective. If I watch Tucker Carlson, which is entertaining as fuck very often, I know that it's a conservative leaning platform. So I'm not going to, dig into him for leaning right. So what I'm going to do in the future is I'm going to stop saying that I'm unbiased and just say I'm trying to tell the truth
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like that word is so loaded. And once you say you're unbiased, you just become like a punching bag for people who disagree with you.
Mm-hmm. Because then the second you do lean one way or the other, they come after you and they're like,
Yeah.
well, what? And it's like, well, maybe like let me backtrack then and say like as a viewer watching your videos, it feels like when you go into things, you're more neutral about it. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't seem like as a viewer you're going into something like expecting something to happen, and it doesn't feel like you're prodding people either for like a specific response, which I
Yeah,
think.
definitely. That's like a Louis Theroux technique that I used to, because it's my kind of inspiration as far as journalism is this British guy, Louis Theroux from BBC. And that's kind of his approach too. Like, no matter how he feels about somebody, he'll walk in with the same neutral energy. And that's very beneficial. And part of it's so crazy. Like, I'll interview a conservative. I will be incredibly nice to them. I'm talking about like a Trump guy. I'll be super nice to him. I won't edit the video in any way, and then I'll put it out, and the comments will be making fun of the guy, and then all the conservatives get mad at me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, dude, I'm not even editing this guy or being mean to him or even debating him. This is just a lot of people. You hold a mirror up, and they get upset when people, don't like what they see.
Do you feel
Yeah.
like you have a fan base in that realm of conservatives?
No,
Um, because I feel like I've seen some interviews you do at like MAGA type rallies and stuff, and people are maybe just happy to be on camera.
I don't know
Um,
what it is because it's confusing to me because I pretty much am against everything that they stand for.
mhm,
Aside from I agree that social media platforms shouldn't censor. I believe in like the free anarchistic internet that we grew up with where the internet
mhm,
was crazy. I think that like the liberal establishment has like clamped down hard on free speech on the internet, which is given that's what's kind of what's given Trump like this messianic figure status in their minds because they're like he says what he wants, he's anti-censorship. And there was a time when there was everybody in the US was anti-censorship, but after 2016, especially with the pandemic, it kind of shifted because then all of a sudden these companies had this responsibility to filter out speech that differed with the government narrative, and that just became a nightmare. But as far as the fan base, I mean, I if you go online, you'd think they don't like me, but when I'm in person, like I don't make fun of them. I try to treat people with respect when I'm in the field. Like Jordan Klepper is an example of someone who's just like straight up making fun of them. Like he's
mhm.
like, for the Daily Show, he's actually being mean to them.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do that to them, but I'm also done with covering conservative shit. Like, you know what I'm really done with though is covering Middle Eastern issues. That shit is a nightmare, bro. Every time you step into that realm, you can't win. Like, no matter how you
Yeah.
cover anything, especially with Israel Palestine, like your comment section is gonna be fucked no matter what. So I
Yeah,
just
it's a
stop.
it's a tough world for that right now, definitely.
Yeah, bro.
Going back to like so the lost languages and stuff, do you have a timeline or kind of idea of when you want to put those projects forward?
Just as soon as the Dear Kelly promotion is over, like I'm probably gonna
Hmm.
keep promoting this until like I think April or something, because movies aren't like YouTube videos. It's acceptable to promote them for a long period of time. Sometimes people promote a movie for like a whole year.
Hmm.
So I'm gonna promote that for a while, and then try to have a streamer pick it up, and then I'm gonna go to the Lost Languages project. I just like language, and like it's crazy that there's 150 endangered languages in the continental U.S. Like people don't even think about that.
Yeah, that's wild.
It's pretty
How
sad.
do you feel like Dear Kelly's been perceived so far?
Yeah, it's been really well. I mean, it's like
Hmm.
the numbers are great with the rentals. I think people really like it. I think that they connect with it a lot because a lot of people, especially in our generation, have at least one family member who has sort of gone the Kelly route and is just totally enveloped by conspiracy theories and that like, bitter way of thinking that there's this like nebulous force of evil that's out there that's trying to take out every red-blooded American hardworking patriot. And what that force is, they said it was the deep state, but now we see a new deep state forming around Trump. It's pretty crazy that he used the deep state language to, obviously talk about like the democratic establishment and the bureaucracy. But now you're seeing like these tech oligarchs forming as like a private, uh, I guess, like council around him. It's crazy. Like, how is that not the deep state? It's just fascinating how you see time and time again working class people getting tricked by these politicians into believing that they actually care about them and that they're like invested in their best interest at the end of the day. It's really sad to see, but I think we're doomed either way as a country. It's just a matter of when.
Hmm. And you would think with like the amount of coverage on all this, I feel like especially too being a Democrat and being a conservative, it's black or white. It's like you're
Yeah.
one or the other. If you're in the middle, people just say you're non-committal and like you're not invested. It's like there's no spectrum anymore.
Yeah.
That
It's
doesn't.
it's so crazy because if Bernie Sanders would have been given a fair shot in the 2016 primaries against Hillary Clinton, we wouldn't be in this situation. We wouldn't have Trump or an extremely out of touch, arguably, in my opinion, conservative establishment. That's what I'd call the DNC. Just totally speaking for the left, but with no awareness of like what we're on. It's just crazy to me that we have that we have such a weak progressive party that you allowed someone like Trump to take full control of the country.
Yeah, and with as much as like media covers all of these different issues, and like we have real videos of him and other like big politicians just saying absolutely disgusting things, you
Yeah.
would think that people would see that and be horrified and be like, "Oh my God, this is my life," but also like my family, my family's lives and everything being affected, but they don't seem to care that
Yeah,
much. They
it's
don't.
nuts. And to make things worse, I think that liberals have deployed a lot of tactics to fragment and make it so the left can't actually mobilize. One would be like this like rigorous pushing of like identity politics everywhere that you see, and this like hierarchy of privilege in which they say that it's not based upon experience, but if you are from a marginalized population, you have to have a larger voice than somebody who might not be from a historically marginalized population but understands the science of revolution and progress. And then you have at the same time this culture within leftism where everyone is constantly tearing each other down for anything. And that's why we've seen that if any leftist leader begins to rise, they get, dragged from to the depths of hell before they can even get there. And that's why you haven't seen a leftist leader. And whereas conservatives, like you said, it's the opposite point of the spectrum, right? Black and white. A conservative person, a leader, can say the worst fucking thing in the world. Elon Musk can do a Hitler salute. Trump can say the craziest shit, and they have a way of systematically dissociating that action, apologizing for it, gaslighting other people into believing that it never happened. And then on the left, you see a complete binary where if anyone does something against a program in their eyes, it's complete and total social exile forever with no program for rehabilitation.
It's almost like with like the left side, the individuality is like it's toxic. It's like if
Hmm.
there isn't exactly what each individual person wants them to be, then they're not cut out for it. But more like on the conservative side, you just are, it's kind of like you slap a label on it and it's like, yeah, this is what we stand for. It has the label that I want it to be, even if they aren't exactly saying something that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because they're labeling themselves as that, they're like, you know what? It's good enough. Like we
Yeah,
can't
that's
get
that's
enough
so
of this.
true. It's so true. That's such a good observation because even on the conservative right, there is huge disagreements, especially about like drug legalization. You have people on the right who are like these Bitcoin libertarians who drink ayahuasca and smoke weed 5 times a day. And then you have like Christian fundamentalists who go to pro-life marches and think that marijuana was like given to us by the devil to, make white women want to like crossbreed with different races and shit. You know what I mean? And so, and then you have them fucking all hanging out together wearing the same hat, not even talking about that. Then you got like these college protests and shit where there's like someone who's pulling the ableist card on some guy who's taller than everybody else. Like, it's crazy that we're in this position. So I wonder if it's like the collectivism and collective mentality on the right versus the hyper individuality and sensitivity on the left is what's created this like stagnation.
And it doesn't even feel like there's a way to really bridge that gap because it's like everybody is so far up their own ass. We can't just like come together and talk about like in a calm and collected way, talk about our differences and what we also all collectively agree in or
Yeah.
agree on. It's like it's just so far divided that when I think about it, I start to get overwhelmed because I'm like, how do we fix it?
Yeah.
I also know that mentality, a lot of other people have that mentality where it's like, oh, it's too big of a problem to even fix. And that's
Hmm.
part of the issue is like we aren't willing to like face that challenge necessarily and be like, okay, I know it's a really big issue, but we all need to sit down and like figure it out. Nobody wants to do that.
I think that's yeah. No, I hear you on that. I feel like that's why I appreciated the Dear Kelly like documentary, and a lot of people are perceiving it well. Is like we could actually have a conversation.
Mhm.
Whereas I think most people would see Kelly and just kind of brush them off. But Andrew, like you said, and I've heard a lot of people say it's like we all have a family member that's like that
Hmm.
that we sit across from at Thanksgiving, and it's like I don't know, it's weird. It's like the media kind of want to just push that away and ignore that, but in
Yeah.
actual reality, it's like these are people that we interact with day to day.
Exactly. And it's with the HBO project, I had to fight so hard to like platform these problematic individuals, but then those individuals became the voting majority. And the subtext of the film to me, beneath everything, is just the need, and this is going to sound cliche, but for like affordable mental health services in the US. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, seriously, like if I had a family member like Kelly, going through that, like with psychiatric intervention in the early stages, post eviction, post foreclosure, he definitely could have been put on the right path to recovery. But instead, he was thrown to the wolves, basically homeless on the streets out here. You know what I mean? Sleeping in the parking lot of a Motel 6 in a car. You know what I mean? Like that shouldn't even be something that's happening. There's no social safety net for people who are experiencing crisis, especially middle-aged men.
Mhm.
The average age of a homeless man in America is 54 years old. And
Mhm.
that's to me, that just kind of tells you all you need to know. Like it's not like there's so many lonely, broken, especially older dudes who just are afraid to talk about their feelings. They're raised under this like toxic positivity of the Reagan era where it's like if you complain, that makes you like un-American or like less of a man. So they're just told to stick it out and they're experiencing psychosis. And then here comes a political movement that allows their anger to join a collective, like you're saying, and then here we are. And the goal of the movie is not necessarily to like paint every Trump supporter as like a charity case who needs desperate mental health intervention because that's not everybody, but more it's more just an empathy project for people that are all the way on the far right.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think it was interesting too when you gave the statistic about like the bankruptcy and foreclosure of all the people that were at January 6th.
Yeah.
And I feel like it is, if you look at it the right way, it's a really strong piece about mental health. With all the projects that you've done, what do you see most like helping where we're at with mental health and improving the state of mental health care?
I mean, probably this one, but then again, also anything related to homelessness, like Philly streets, Vegas tunnels, San Francisco streets, those documentaries definitely touch on mental health stuff. But I kind of want to do a series about like specific psychological disorders, like in the same way that
Hmm.
I'm doing a series about probably 5 to 10 endangered languages. There's a bunch of interesting mental health conditions that are like in the US that are fascinating to people. And I'm not just talking about phobias. Like I have one hallucinogenic post-perception disorder, like flashbacks, like people who live with acid flashbacks, PTSD in veterans. I think if I want to like make a salient mental health point, I should probably zoom in on like what specific mental health condition we're talking about. Because we're not just
Hmm.
talking about depression. We're talking about like I'm not even sure what Kelly had going on. I'm not
Hmm.
even sure if he was mentally ill necessarily. I feel like that's kind of a band-aid they slap on people who are just like hyped up. But there could have been, I've heard from several psychiatrists who have seen Dear Kelly, they think there was some like narcissistic personality disorder going on there. But I don't want to speak too much on it. And he's probably going to see this, so I don't want to, talk shit about him.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. I think it would be I've I feel like the mental health realm, it's something that's talked about a lot, but people don't get super in depth with it. They just think of, the main big hitters. So anxiety, depression, PTSD, OCD,
Mhm.
and eating disorders, that kind of thing. And so it's become, again, this like very generalized topic that also people think has been beaten to death. But there are so many smaller avenues that you can go down that get more like at the point of what some people
Mhm.
feel and
Yeah.
having the power and kind of like the scope to be able to do that and advertise, well, not advertise isn't the right word, but put like a spotlight on it. I think that's not something that I've really seen done before, and I think that would be
Yeah.
cool to focus in on that more and, give like specifics and give examples
Yeah.
too and show real people who are suffering through it.
Yeah, that would be really good. I'm glad you like the idea because unfortunately, like a lot of therapy speak has bled its way into like casual conversations. Like fools calling each other narcissists and just like people using like the words like boundaries and like the Jonah Hill text messages and shit. Like there's just shit like that where you see like people use therapy speak to just like do whack shit. You know what I mean? Like I've had roommates before who like I accidentally ate one of their like a kind bar, like a Cliff Bar. You know what I mean? I thought it was mine, and then they were just like sent me this like therapy coded shit that basically told me I had to get out by the next morning. You know what I mean? I was like, you might as well just say you're an asshole, get the fuck out of here.
Mhm.
So if I'm gonna go in the mental health like realm, I definitely like want to get really specific. Yeah, and you're right, not just PTSD because that's just like one thing, but HPPD, like things that people don't even necessarily know, exist. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's a really good way to go about it. And I'm like glad to hear that you're kind of interested in doing mental health stuff because I feel like a lot of issues in the US specifically is like once you strip it away, like the root of it sometimes is mental health, especially with like drug addiction and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's mental health and real estate. Those are like the two
Hmm.
things. That's like the cause of every problem.
Yep.
If you look deep enough, it's like landlords or like health insurance companies every time.
Yep.
They're the two heavy hitters.
They are.
I think that would be a super cool idea, and I'm definitely excited to see like what all you would be able to do with that. I
Yeah.
think especially with TikTok exploding the way it did during quarantine, everybody was bored and everybody was, doing their own research and like projecting it onto the internet. So not so many people like self-diagnose and think that they know what's going on, and then they diagnose other people, and it's just so.
Yeah, I think TikTok is the most dangerous social media application there is, not because of Chinese interference, but because every other social media app, Facebook, Instagram, even X, like there's a social media platforms where you have friends and you have followers and you talk to each other. TikTok is just you and algorithm. You're not even following your friends on TikTok. Most people who have most people who are TikTok personalities are engaged with people they're not even connected to in real life. Whereas Instagram is very much an extension of life. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I talk to my friends on Instagram every day. TikTok just permanently modified the way that people interact with the internet. And yeah.
That's so, I never thought about it like that. I wanted to ask you what you thought about TikTok being banned. Like how do you think that will affect the future of media consumption and journalism, but just in general, like what are your feelings?
Well, I mean, in general, I think that's a good thing as far as like the youth right now. I think their brains are so fried by this stuff, and we're going to see in like 15 years. I think the literacy rates are going to be like insanely low. I mean, people can't even. These kids they don't even read books. Like, how are they going to be able to read? These like my little cousins and stuff. Like, I know the iPad kids thing is kind of like a tired trope a little bit, but they're on that thing like every single day. When I was a kid, I was seriously kicking the can around. You know what I mean? Playing with sticks, riding, shooting Nerf guns with my friends. And not saying that kids aren't doing that now. They probably are somewhere. But, I think that in general, whether or not TikTok is banned or not, in 10, 15 years, you're going to see a major shift where people revert to like a pre-digital social media landscape. Even now, people want physical media again. They're buying Game Boys. Like people are reverting not just out of nostalgia, but for stress relief purposes. People don't want these VR headsets. Like even now, there was a study that came out yesterday about video games where the market data suggested that people wanted graphics to get more and more realistic. But a study just came back a week ago that said people actually don't like realistic graphics, and people don't want VR headsets where they feel like they're inside of a video game. People don't want this level of like psychotic immersion and reality into the digital world. As much as they're banking on that, people don't want AI. So, I think that in 10, 15 years, you're going to have people in our generation and younger who are voluntarily raising their kids offline. I think there's going to be schools and social movements that are based upon like restoring old pre-internet values. And yeah, because it's making people stupider, not smarter. And that was the opposite of what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, we're
Mhm.
almost at a place where we're kind of reverting back. That kind of transitions into something too I wanted to talk about is I just finished reading your zine.
Mm,
And I was surprised to see you were kind of like starting out as thinking like you wanted to just do writing.
yeah.
And also it was cool to see that side of your journalism. It sounds like you're planning to write more zines in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I'm making them right now. I'm pretty
Hmm.
much like what I want to do is I want to make a zine or a book really this time about every year from 2020 until now, and I want to stay 5 years ahead. So like in 2025, I'm gonna drop the 2020 book, and then in 2026, you know what I mean? I feel like 5 years is a good buffer period where like it's still like interesting as a time capsule to think about how things were, but it's still fresh enough to where the source material is semi-relevant.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that. It was cool to see that kind of writing side of you.
Thanks.
Um, Also too, so I thought it was interesting. So you and me met at like a David Cho event.
Yeah,
And I always wondered like his influence on you. Because he did the Thumbs Up Vice documentary and you kind of
yeah.
kicked the book off with saying like you kind of watched that and saw, you were still able to hitchhike and stuff like that. So it's kind of curious, like, yeah, his influence on you and if you kind of have a relationship with him.
Yeah, I talk to David all the time. He's a huge influence. I mean, he's a busy guy. He lives in Portugal now, so I can't see him all the time. But I mean, he's always held it down and given me words of wisdom and advice on a number of topics. But yeah, when I was younger, back in the day, Vice was the shit, like before it got bought by all these investment firms, like 2015, 2016, and before, Vice was like bringing back journalism. Like journalism was not even cool at all. Like it was the lamest shit ever before Vice came and started doing their thing. I mean, I'm sure you remember being in like middle school, high school, seeing
Yeah.
Vice stocks and being like, bro, this is tight. I want to be a journalist.
Yeah.
And but they never did anything about hitchhiking. And then I seen the David Show documentary, and I was like, I'd already wanted to hitchhike, but I was reading these books from the 60s about hitchhiking, and it sounded great, but I figured that culture had more or less died when the hippie movement washed away. And I saw him doing it, and I was like, oh shit, you can still hitchhike without going to jail. This is tight. And then I just kind of dived into it.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, going back to Dear Kelly a little bit. So, after I met you there, we went to that dive bar and ended up hanging out with Kaylee and Kyle.
Yeah, I forgot
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. I was
Yeah.
like, it was a really unique perspective it gave me because, yeah, after watching that documentary. But I wanted to ask too, like, how often you hang out with them and kind of how that deeper relationship came to be outside of the journalism.
I mean, they're just like, thankfully they're only like 3 or 4 years younger than me. So I chill with them all the time. Whenever Kyle and Kaylee are in town, we always kick it. I mean, I love hanging out with them. They're fun. And they were huge in putting the documentary together because they believed in the vision from the very beginning. Kyle and Kaylee did.
Hmm.
They understood it in a way that Kelly didn't because Kelly's kind of in his own like heroic narrative. They understood what I was trying to do. And they were the ones who, suggested that I film the intervention. It wasn't necessarily my idea. I probably would have if I were to come up with the intervention idea, I'd probably be like, no, that's way too intimate for me to, sit in on. But they felt like the cameras being there would make Kelly actually more inclined to go to therapy. If that makes sense. If you
Hmm.
consider his sort of main character narrative, he's seeing his whole family's there. They're emotional. There's six cameras around. If he says, I'm not going to therapy, what the fuck? Then that makes him the villain.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
In a way, do you think that made his decision to go to therapy less real? Like less genuine?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I would say probably, yeah, especially if you consider how he behaved immediately after.
Yeah.
But some of those phone calls that we had when he was calling me from the treatment center, I didn't like tell him that I was recording those phone calls. I mean, I was recording them for safekeeping, and I asked him after if I could use them. But he was being genuine when he was telling me I need to apologize to Bill Joyner and all of this shit. So like, he wasn't bullshitting for camera points. I just think that the intensity of the intervention probably washed off. That's how it is a lot of times, when you have an intense family situation and then things kind of restore. Some sense of normalcy is restored, and you're like, all right, you know what? Fuck it. It sounds like a lot to deal with right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that the ultimatum in the intervention wasn't exactly clear because the kids told me beforehand that the ultimatum was seek treatment and stay in California or we're going to cut you off. But they didn't tell him that during the intervention. They didn't say like you need to stay in California, you need to let politics take a back seat, and you need to be more involved in our lives. Instead, the interventionist kind of took the lead, and there was a heavy emphasis on cannabis addiction.
So he didn't even really have a clear directive. All he knew is he was just in a room with all these people who were like upset with him, and he was like, "Oh shit, maybe I am the problem." But it
Yeah,
didn't really seem like he was willing, especially too, because like from what you were saying, like during the documentary, that he just kept putting emphasis on marijuana being the issue.
Mhm.
Like he didn't seem to like, I don't know if like he is incapable or just doesn't want to. Like,
I think you could also look at the rehab industry itself and how they're incentivized to classify people as like addicts. Like it's such an like the American 12-step model is like you're either an addict or you're not. You're either a broken person who must abstain forever and seek spiritual enlightenment, or you're just a perfect person. And like I don't know if it was him who realized that he can go to treatment and just like kind of trick them a little bit and only talk about the weed, or if he went there and they were like, "You're addicted to weed. You're an addict. You need to start by pursuing complete sobriety, and then from there, God will do the rest." A lot of 12-step programs are like that. You know what I mean? And if you look at where he went to treatment at, he went to treatment in Tennessee. I mean, not he went to treatment in Pennsylvania. It wasn't like a West Coast California sober style rehab facility. I mean, I don't want to say anything bad about the treatment center because they gave him a full scholarship, and it would have been 30K, but it was free because they wanted to help move this along. But yeah, like I think that weed addiction was a factor, but not the main factor.
mhm. Yeah, that part when I got to the part where you and Kyle and Kaylee were talking about how well he was doing during treatment and all the things that he was saying, and then hearing that he just reverted right back and was just blaming it on the marijuana. I don't know the guy. I don't have nearly as close of a relationship with him that you
Mhm.
do. My like initial feeling about it is that he probably did hear them saying it's the drugs, it's the drugs.
Yeah,
It's not an active choice, which I feel like would also reflect to how conservative he is as well. Like all these people, talking about like, no, this is, XYZ is the issue, not the actual people. It's like all, like all this like external
yeah,
factors.
definitely. And he always, yeah, you're that's a good parallel to draw because he made it seem like the weed was like this external force that he wasn't ingesting. Like it's not, it's literally the weed, like as if he's not smoking the weed itself and then behaving a certain way.
Yeah, like it was whispering in his ear, like, Kelly, Kelly.
Yeah.
And he was
Go to
like,
the Planned Parenthood.
yeah, harass them for the baby parts. Like,
Yeah. Don't go to your daughter's sub eating disorder treatment center.
yeah.
Yeah, I think he definitely was able to kind of lean on that quite a bit, um, which a
Yeah.
lot of people do in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
It,
the rehab industry is literally incentivized to look for like solutions. Like that they
Mhm.
have, like paperwork they have to fill out where they say with classification, addict, substance, marijuana, and then the check boxes, did you keep him sober? And if you have 90 days of sobriety, boom, we did a good job. You're going to get
Mhm.
investment.
mhm. Yeah, I think it really speaks on to um just how people don't want to take like responsibility for their actions, and it's just easier to have like the scapegoat of the drugs or the opposing political party. It's like, no, this is not like an active choice that I'm making. There's other factors coming in that are forcing me to be this way. I don't have a choice.
Yeah,
Mhm. I think,
exactly.
yeah, and also, kind of at the corporate level, and when things are kind of, bigger picture where it's like, oh, they just need the check of like someone sober, it becomes dangerous. That kind of leads me to a point I wanted to get to too, is like, I've seen kind of a shift in your journalism. I've heard you talk about it, and
Yeah,
it almost seems like you're kind of doing more direct help with people, like
yeah,
throwing people's, Venmo in there, with the Vegas tunnels. I think that video showed a whole shift. And it's interesting that the Dear Kelly started so early and being released now, but there's definitely been a huge shift in how you've gone about helping people, I guess, in a sense.
yeah. I mean, a lot of that had to do with the fact, and I'm not trying to hate on my own fans because I appreciate them so much. A lot of that had to do with the fact that I felt like I was being overpraised for doing basically nothing except interviewing people who were downtrodden. You know,
Hmm.
like I would talk to someone, everyone would be like, "Bro, Andrew, dog, like you're a fucking legend for humanizing these people." I'm like, "What did you think they were before, dude? Animals?" You know what I mean? And I realized I was like, "Nah, I'm like, I'm glad that people appreciate the humanization of otherwise like people who are on the fringe, but at the same time, as a person." I know that me making a humanizing documentary isn't going to do anything to change their life. And
Hmm.
not that I'm going to go around saving everyone's life, but if I'm going to get this involved with a documentary subject and gain so much from it in terms of material to use for a documentary, that obviously I make some level of money and success from, I should at least try to do my best to influence their life in something of a positive direction, even if it fails.
Yeah, and I guess like as we're wrapping up here, just talking about journalism in general, what do you feel the purpose of journalism is?
Just to, I mean, for me, I think like there's two kinds of journalism. There's like straightforward like Associated Press reporting where they release a bulletin about, how many people died at an event or what the weather is like, and that is just about the purpose is giving people facts and information that is real. The
Hmm.
second part, which is more in line with documentary filmmaking, I think is just like this sounds corny, I guess, but just telling human stories, man.
Hmm.
Real intimate zoom-ins of people who are affected by the trials and tribulations of the modern era. And
Mhm.
yeah, just being real, showing people what's going on and breaking through some of the headlines that are reported and, showing the truths or falsehoods in mainstream narratives. And unfortunately, journalism is taking a pivot to where you have people who are masquerading themselves as independent, anti-corporate journalists, yet they're following the identical incentive structure of the mainstream press. Clickbait titles, stoking fear and outrage,
Mhm.
false light, all these things. And so the world of independent journalism is just as sketchy as the world of corporate media.
Yeah, I recently saw you kind of talk about how the 24-hour news cycle is kind of just transferring over to YouTube with clickbait
Oh,
and
it
stuff
is.
like that.
It's the exact same thing. So it's just hilarious that when people are like, "Fuck Fox News." Anyways, here's a fucking Haitian cat eating propaganda video. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh man, it's great to be independent. Like you might be independent, but you're literally using salacious headlines to create ad revenue, and then that's exactly what they do. The only difference is that they have a bureaucracy and that kind of structure.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, no, when I think about the reality of news and journalism and everything, it's hard not to feel just despair a little bit because it's hard to, it's hard to know like what's real and like what you can actually digest without feeling bad about it. And it's even hard to like talk to people about the news today too because people on the left side again, if you don't agree with the exact article that they're reading or writing, then you're
Yeah,
a bad guy. The conservatives, they've got, Trump out here saying that people are eating the cats and they're like this is the important issue today. So
exactly.
it's
And in the same way that you have outrage addiction on the right, you also have some level of what I call like empathy addiction on the left, where they just give their penance every day by like feeling bad for someone who's in a bad position, and then they move on to the next video. And that's almost sort of similar. It's like I want to feel good about myself by feeling bad about somebody else.
Mhm.
And that's kind of become like the liberal equivalent of the 24-hour news cycle. It's like, oh my God, that's so sad. All right, next thing.
Yeah, or it's like kind of like people on TikTok posting photos of their like dying family members or like their like
I
dying
haven't seen that.
and it's like please help save my pop from cancer, just watch this video 15 times and comment, and then it's like okay, well I did my good deed for the day, I commented and I watched 12 times, so we're good, and then you forget about
I didn't know. That's horrifying. So I guess I am right. I didn't. I
Yeah.
didn't know it got that dark, but I believe you.
No, there's some crazy stuff on TikTok. There's a big one where they'll show like a viral TikTok and then we'll cut away and it will be, yeah, like the family you said. Like it's pretty wild.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Where it's
it's
like,
just
yeah,
unexpected. You're like
yeah,
laughing at this video and then it just cuts and it's like in the middle of Gaza and you're like, oh shit.
yeah, yeah. I've seen that shit before.
Mhm.
That's a
Yeah, that's
wild time for media.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's bad.
that's ultimately the reason why I ended up getting rid of social media was because it's just so stark. And I was like, wow, I am actively part of the population who's digesting all of this, and I'm not even thinking about any of it anymore. I'm just doing
Yeah,
this to fill my time because I'm like addicted to it.
it's a
And
total nightmare.
yeah, and I myself was even falling into the trap of being like, okay, well, I watched this video of this really cute cat. Put it on repeat for 2 minutes. I'm an angel. I did what I needed to do, for the good deed. And then I immediately go on watching to some like brain rot video of someone making fun of like, like the kind of video it's like you can't
Yeah,
show your boss because the boss is going to be like, I don't know
yeah.
that
And
one.
I think at the forefront of this brain rot culture is live streamers. I think they are the worst of the worst, because they don't even make anything. They just
Mhm.
watch other people's things. So it's like where the matrix just gets further and further to where like you're watching brain rot videos and dumb shit being consumed and broken down for you by someone who you don't know, and you're too lazy to think about anything happening. So you just let them react to shit for you and just sit there quietly. It's like we're in the end times for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
I,
where's any of the thought process?
Oh my
yeah.
God, bro. Yeah.
I have been very hopeful though, especially with Channel 5 doing so well on YouTube. And I think Dear Kelly's it's been really successful, especially
Mhm.
moving forward from the HBO documentary for you to do it like directly to consumers. It's been really cool to see that.
Thanks, bro.
Cool. Well, I know our time's, coming to a close here. So I just want to say thank you again for,
Yeah.
being willing to talk about everything. It was a really cool opportunity to be able to pick your brain a little bit and
Well,
go,
yeah, you guys are awesome.
Yeah, it
yeah.
was good to talk to you again. And yeah, thank you so much for doing this. Is there anything else you wanted to put out there? Anything we didn't get to?
Nah, shout out to you guys, man. DearKellyFilm.com.